There's a power button on your right side of the wheel, so it's like a light switch. So you're going to want to turn your wheel on. There's a little green light that will come on. Are you guys right-handed or left-handed?
Right.
Perfect. So do you see that switch that says forward, reverse?
Yeah.
We want reverse.
If you were a lefty, you'd do.
If you were a lefty, you'd go the other way. So this, and you've got a pedal, kind of like you're driving a car. Okay. So get the feel for the pedal. Kind of put it in a place where it's comfortable for your foot. Yeah. Kind of like a sewing machine. Yep.
Yeah.
The more you press down with your toes, the faster it's going to go. And if you need to stop it, pedal's not working.
Oh,
Pedal's not
it's
working.
okay. I'm just kidding.
The other thing too, this little apron should be clicked in because we're going to get water in there. So if it's not, some of them are a little harder to do than others. And they haven't been used. There we go. They haven't been used all summer. You good there?
Yeah.
Yes, because we don't want it dripping all over your legs once we get water in there. Okay? You also want to be really close to your wheel. So you got to get real up close and personal with it. And girls, if you're wearing skirts, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So I would try to plan ahead and wear pants on days that you're going to be on the wheel. And you get this really fashionable apron, right? So the apron actually ties behind your knees, and that helps keep your pants clean.
The other
Okay.
one came in your other leg.
Oh, that's all right. So when you start, you're going to want to start with clay. This is probably maybe a big piece, so you can kind of rip it down. Do you guys have jewelry on? You might want to take your watch off too, because you might get a little messy. And do you have a hair tie? No.
I always do, and I don't.
Jacqueline, can you get one for her? There are some new ones in that bucket on the sink that say hair ties. Yeah. Are there any in there?
Yeah.
Great. So definitely girls with long hair, you got to tie your hair back. One, you don't want your hair to get full of clay because you are going to be leaning over. Two, it's a spinning wheel, right? So we want to be safe and we don't want our hair to get caught and then our head gets sucked into the wheel. That would be bad news.
That just broke. Is there another one? That was a tiny little.
So I cut some clay. You're going to want to prep your clay before you start because your hands are going to get really dirty. So, and again, I have a little kind of chart on the wall just to help remind you of some of these steps. So you want to wedge like 3 to 4 pieces of clay into nice balls. So again, we want to kind of compact it to squeeze out any air bubbles. Why are air bubbles bad in clay?
Explosion.
What specifically? What happens that would cause it? Why does it explode?
The air expands.
Air expands, and then if there's nowhere for that air to go, your piece is going to explode, right? So air pockets are bad. So we want to kind of squeeze the clay and compact it. And we want to do that with maybe both of your pieces now while your hands are clean. And I have some extra if we need it. So the smaller the piece of clay, the easier it's going to be, all right? No clay bigger than like a softball size or like a big grapefruit. If you try to throw a big piece, it just takes more to try to center it. So the smaller piece is going to be best. All right, especially as you're learning. If you want to see some crazy stuff, there are some potters out there who will throw like 25 pounds of clay, which is the size of those bags, or even 50 pounds of clay, and it's just massive, and it takes so much strength to get it to center. But there's some pretty cool YouTube videos. Once you've tried it once with a small piece, you really get an appreciation for some of those potters who can do huge pieces. All right. So once our clay is ready and our wheel's set up, we are going to attach the clay to our bat. Now, some people say to wet the bat. I find it's best because we're using plastic bats to stick it onto a dry one. All right. So to make my job easier, I want to try to get it as close to the middle as I can. So I'm going to kind of visualize where that middle is, and I'm just going to slam it as close to the middle as I can get it. Nice. And you might even want to try to like pinch to kind of really fuse it to the bottom of the wheel. Okay? Now, we want our wheel going kind of a medium speed. Not too fast, not too slow. And again, because we're right-handed, the wheel's going counterclockwise. Is anyone left-handed?
Yeah.
You are, yeah. So you might try it this way, or you might want to reverse it. It's really like, people can do it either way. In Asia, they always spin their wheels clockwise. We tend to spin our wheels counterclockwise. So it's really, it can work either way, but you're gonna have to, if you spin your wheel the opposite way, you're gonna have to reverse kind of what I'm saying with what hand is inside and outside, okay? Because we gotta think about kind of that physics and the centrifugal force. All right, so as the wheel's spinning, again, about a medium speed, and I recommend keeping your foot on the pedal. So don't like, let it go, because if you do need to stop the wheel quickly for any reason, you don't want to be searching around with your foot for where that pedal is. So just rest your pedal right on the, or rest your foot right on the pedal. So we need to add water. So you guys have a little cup there with a sponge. All right. So the water's gonna kind of help cut down on the friction. So if you feel like your hands are getting warm, add more water. All right. So the first task before we can start shaping things is centering. So to get the clay centered, it's gonna take some arm strength, all right? So to do this, you gotta hold the clay, but if the clay is wobbling your arms around, you're not gonna be moving the clay closer to the center. You really need to be leaning over your clay. You wanna brace your elbows right into your hips, and you really wanna start kind of squeezing, okay? Ooh. Now this is a good experience. Look at what happened. My thing slid right off. So I had some water in there, or it wasn't perfectly kind of attached, which is why you want to have some paper towels. So I'm just going to kind of dry this up, dry this, kind of re-wedge it a little bit, and then slam it down again. Okay? All right, so centering is going to be probably one of the hardest parts. You can see your clay's kind of wobbling, so it's not perfectly centered. When it's centered all the way, it shouldn't look like it's moving.
Oh, okay.
All right, so if you can see it kind of bouncing, it's not perfectly centered. Hey, do you want to join in?
No, that's all right. I just came
Just
to
gonna
watch.
come to watch?
Just came to make fun of people.
It's
Way
so
to be
much fun.
supportive.
I'm just kidding.
All right, so to center, there are lots of different techniques. So this is where if what I say is not quite working for you, you might want to look up some alternate methods. So one thing that I like to do is kind of push down for 5 seconds and then push out for 5 seconds. So I'll kind of take my hands and layer them together for strength and kind of just push down into the wheel for 5 seconds, and then kind of push my hands away from me, kind of pushing the clay into the middle of the wheel for about 5 seconds. And then just keep doing that repeatedly until the clay starts to kind of find the middle. Now again, you've got to control the clay. If the clay is controlling your hands and moving your whole arms around, you're just not being strong enough. So that's why bracing your elbows into your hips is going to give you a lot of stability with that. So again, press away from your body and then press down. And kind of keep repeating that for a few times until this clay starts to appear like it's not moving, even though it's spinning. All right? So Krista, or Ms. Skulik, you might want to make your wheel go a little bit faster.
Okay.
Yeah. And Mrs. Moran, your wheel looks a little dry.
Yeah.
So adding more water. If you feel like it's heating up and you're feeling that friction, just keep adding water as needed. Okay. So again, kind of bracing your hands together, pushing away from your body for 5 seconds, and then pushing down for 5 seconds. So, Ms. Skulik, yours is getting kind of tall.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Moran, yours is getting kind of flat. So we want to try to kind of find a happy medium between the
Pushing too
two.
hard? Can you push too hard?
So try, in your case, try pushing with your palm, kind of from the edge to the middle, to kind of lift it up.
And I want to push
And you
down.
want to kind of push more down.
Okay.
So mine was centered, and I moved my hands too quickly away, and it kind of became off-centered. So when you're working with the clay, you want to use very smooth and controlled and slow movements. If you move too quickly, you're going to kind of throw the balance off. All right, so again, moving, kind of pressing down for 5, and you can see how my hands are not moving. I'm using all my strength in my arms, which isn't much, but I'm really focusing, and my hands are stable and they're locked into my body. So if you see your hands moving around, you need to kind of summon that strength to be able to control the clay so the clay is not controlling you. Okay? It is not uncommon for your first time on the wheel to spend an hour just trying to get the piece centered. All right? So it's really about kind of that persistence and just to keep trying. And again, this is where different methods might work better for you. Some people will form kind of like a brace with one hand and kind of squeeze in with the other. So you can try that method too. So if you are, you can really do this with either hand, but you can form kind of a lock with one hand and kind of press the clay in with the other and kind of squeeze it towards the middle. So that's a technique that works for some people, but you've really got to keep both hands pretty tight. That's looking a lot better. Yep, it's a little lumpier on the bottom, so if you can kind of squeeze into the center more, and try keeping your hands really locked and add more water. Oh, so now we're getting really off. So if that's the case, if it's getting just off center, it's only gonna get worse if you try to open and shape something. So if it's kind of also about knowing when just to cut your losses and start with a new piece. So if you do feel like you need to, you can use this kind of wooden stick and just kind of scrape the clay off while it's moving, dry your bat, and then stick a new piece on, okay? But I think we can probably get that back on. It's hard to do standing. Can I sit for a second? And I'll see if I can get it back in for you. I know it's not easy to move around these big aprons. We might be too far off to bring this one back, but we'll see. Sometimes squishing it down. I know, it's a squishy sound. So be careful when you're putting your hands on the clay and taking it off. You want to do it as gentle as possible. And if you do end up with lots of these like kind of globs of slip, just wipe them on the edge of your wheel, or you can use one of your tools to just kind of scrape your hands down. Almost there. So, oh, I left my wheel spinning. I shouldn't have done that. Don't walk away if your wheel's spinning. All right. So, again, the first time you do this, you might just be centering. That's okay. It might take an hour or 2 hours to just figure out just how to get it basically centered on the wheel. But once you're at that point, then you're ready to start opening the clay. All right? So our little acronym that's going to help us is COPS. Center, open, pull, and shape. So I have a little kind of poster there, a little visual, and then on my little cheat sheet on the kind of door behind me, it also kind of gives you tips at each stage. So once we are centered, and again, you know it's centered when you're looking at it and it doesn't appear the clay is bouncing around, then you're ready to open the clay. All right, so to do that, you want to kind of, I like to, because I'm right-handed, kind of brace my hand and then use my right thumb and just kind of press down, almost forming like a little volcano. Okay, so at this point, I only have one hand on the wheel and my thumb is just entering the clay, just pressing down kind of up to the depth of you know, that length from my knuckle to my fingertip. All right, so I've got a little clay volcano here. Can you guys see it? Yes? Now, I'm gonna have to switch. Oh, I'll let you guys get caught up. Yep.
So, okay.
Yep, so with your right hand, just hold the clay and then just hook your thumb down into the middle and just kind of press in. Yep. And again, when you let go of the clay, you want to be as gentle as possible, because especially once we start building height, any little bumps or tips, because this is spinning, is going to throw it off center. Nice. Okay, so once you have that like volcano ready, then you're going to need to switch and kind of put hand over hand and then just continue pressing down. And we want to think about getting the clay, the bottom of the clay, about like 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. All right, so we want to kind of visualize about that thick off the bottom of our piece. We want to leave a good amount of clay at the bottom so we can cut it off the bat later without kind of blowing out the bottom of our pot. All right, so we're going to switch to kind of 2 hands. And again, my elbows are kind of locked into my hips for extra stability so I don't start kind of spinning out of control. And I'm just going to start pressing directly down, and I'm going very slowly.
Should it still be wet?
Yep.
Okay, because mine seems awfully dry.
Yep, if it seems dry, just keep adding water whenever you need it. Okay, so I'm going nice and slow, right down in the middle. And I'm going to stop about when I get to 1/4 inch from the bottom. And again, you have to kind of estimate or visualize kind of where that would be. Alternatively, you could, if you wanted to check the depth, you can stop your wheel. You can use your needle tool, and you can kind of check the depth with the needle tool. So you can stick the needle tool in until it hits the bottom of the wheel, stick your thumb out, and then see how thick that is. That little hole that I made will close up when the clay shrinks, so I don't have to worry about having a hole, okay? Or you can just kind of estimate, just kind of feeling for that place. All right, so do you guys see Mrs. Morin's is kind of wobbly? That's okay, that's actually really great that you made it this far on your first attempt.
Thanks.
But as you start opening and shaping, it's probably gonna like spin out.
Yeah.
But that's okay. You learn just as much from the bad attempts as you do from the ones that work.
I have like a finger hole going right down to the bottom.
Yep. So then our next step is to kind of make a hook. All right. So I'm gonna take my hand, and I'm gonna press down, and then I'm gonna kind of start to open up and widen that bottom hole and make kind of a loop. So it's almost like you have like a donut of clay along the sides. All right, so we want to kind of pull towards us. If you guys want to come over and like watch so you can see closer, you can. Again, clay should be nice and kind of wet. So I'm kind of pulling my fingers towards me just to open up that bottom, so it's not just a hole, it's kind of a hole, like a wider opening. And then as I get closer to me and kind of to the edge of my piece, I'm just gonna pull up with my fingers to make kind of like a donut. Just at the bottom, we're not moving up the walls just yet. Okay. So we've opened our piece, we've made that little hole at the bottom, making our volcano, and now we're just kind of widening out the base. All right. So now you should have kind of a flat bottom. The walls come up, but they're nice and thick and meaty kind of along the top, right? So there's a pretty good mass of clay right here. Good, you guys are doing awesome. Okay. If you've got a whole like lake happening in the middle, you can kind of soak up some of the water. You still want it to be pretty moist, but okay. So we've done the centering and the opening. Now it's time for the pulling. So now my goal is to get all of this wad of clay lengthened up to kind of form a cylinder. So now I'm going to start raising my vessel so it's a pretty straight walled cylinder. All pieces really start with this cylinder shape. Once you have the cylinder, then you can start shaping to different forms. but we really just wanna pull our walls up to a cylinder. Now, think of your wheel like a clock. So if this is 12 o'clock and I'm sitting at 6 o'clock, I wanna kind of visualize this area between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. That, at this point, is the only place I want my hands to have contact with the clay. I don't wanna be touching the clay out here at, 11 p.m. I wanna be touching the clay between 3 and 6. Because of the way the wheel spins, this is gonna be kind of that sweet spot where it's not gonna whip around with too much kind of centrifugal force, all right? So thinking about that sweet spot, my right hand is on the outside and my left hand is on the inside, and they're gonna work in tandem with each other. So your left hand is kind of pulling the clay up, and your right hand is on the outer wall kind of supporting it. So as you go, that right hand is kind of moving along, kind of giving a brace to that clay that you're stretching out. Some people also say if the outer hand is a little higher, that helps, but that's a lot to think about, so don't worry about that right now, okay? So again, I'm just gonna kind of move and lengthen the clay up very slowly, and then when I kind of get to the top, I'm gonna see if I need to do it a second or even a third time, just until the clay walls are pretty consistently of the same thickness, all right? So again, I'm spinning, I'm kind of grabbing that wad of clay, and I'm gonna start very slowly pulling it up. And again, I'm feeling some resistance in my fingers, so I've gotta add some moisture. And then I'm just gonna kind of keep going, continue pulling up as I go. My outer hand is great. Yeah, not
This is
bad.
really hard to do. Oh my god.
So you're just gonna kind of do one pull up. Again, having the wheel spin at a medium speed is good, so just go like a little faster. Yep. Okay. So once you get to the top, your outer rim might be a little like,
Oh no.
so close. That's okay. You have more chances to practice now. So what you can do is take your wooden tool and kind of have the wheel spinning rather slowly, and kind of hold the clay and just kind of scrape.
Scrape it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then use one of the paper towels. Yeah, use one of the paper towels and kind of dry the bat after you get the clay off.
Gotcha. Oh, I have to get it
Yeah.
off. Okay.
And then you can start with your second piece. Okay, see how much you remember about the sentence. All right, so the edge is gonna be kind of a little uneven because it has all that kind of slime on it. So once you do your initial pull, it's good to kind of compress the rim, just kind of pressing down very gently, just to kind of get all that gunk off the very edge of your piece, okay? So I still have a pretty thick, meaty wall here, so I'm gonna pull up again. So I'm gonna do the same procedure, kind of have my right hand on the outside bracing, kind of very slowly. Again, all movements with the wheel are very slow and gentle. If you're moving very quickly, you're gonna have some problems. So you really gotta almost slow down. It's almost like you're kind of meditating as you do this because it's so slow and kind of hypnotic. Oh. So you can see how my piece is starting to wobble at the top. That's an indication it's not perfectly centered anymore. So I'm gonna have to be really kind of gentle as I handle this.
I feel like I'm doing something wrong.
So you're a little off center. Yep. And the more off center you get, the wider it gets, the worse it's gonna get. So yep, go ahead, just like Miss Moore, and just kind of scrape your wheel down and give it a go with the second piece of clay.
It works so hard. Okay.
I know.
So what I missed that direction. What do I do?
Scrape it off.
Scrape it off.
Yeah,
Okay,
with
that's
that
it?
with that wooden tool.
Does it have to be completely clean to start again?
The middle should be dry.
The middle? Okay.
Otherwise, that kind of moisture is going to make it slip off, like mine did initially. Yep. So you're good. And you can kind of use the paper towel and kind of get your hands semi-clean if you can. All right. So while they're going to kind of prep to re-go, I'm going to talk about shaping. All right. So once you get to this basic cylinder shape, then you've got a couple options. You can do something known as collaring. Okay. So at this stage, I want to kind of wet my hands and my tools as opposed to wetting the piece. Because we're getting to kind of that final stage, so I don't want this to get super slimy. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of give my hands a little wipe down with my sponge. I'm gonna make sure my hands are kind of damp. And collaring, if you wanted your piece to get more narrow, again, my elbows are kind of braced into my hips, and I'm just going to kind of squeeze in very gently all the way around. I'm not gonna push this too far because my piece is getting off center and I wanna kind of give you guys the full rundown. Okay, so you can see how collaring, you can kind of shrink a piece or have it come back in. And you can do this at the top, you can do this in the middle. If you wanted a piece to have kind of a narrower midsection, you would just kind of collar in with both hands into the middle. If you wanted this to be more like a bowl as opposed to like a straight-sided vase or mug, you could use, you've got some rib tools. Some are plastic and some are wood. And these can be used for a couple things. So right now, oh yeah, see this is really not centered, but we're gonna see how far I can push it. There's a lot of clay built up kind of around this base where it's flared out. You can use these rib tools to kind of clean a lot of that stuff up, right? So you can kind of scrape it and get a lot of that excess clay off that way. That will save you from trimming it later. You can also use these rib tools on the inside to kind of push out. So if I wanted to do that and kind of flare out a piece, I want my arm, my right hand to be on the outside to kind of support that clay, and I'm just kind of lightly stretching it to open it up to a wider form. Again, I'm being very careful to only touch the clay in that sweet spot between 3 and 6 o'clock. Because if I start handling my clay on the other side, it's gonna spin out of control, all right? So once you get to this point, you really wanna be really aware of only touching the clay in that 3 to 6 o'clock area, okay? All right, so we're going for our second attempt. So once you get to that cylinder, then you want to kind of visualize the shape that you're after, thinking about different form options, pushing out, pushing in. You can do a combination, but clay doesn't like to be, it's not like Play-Doh that you can manipulate endlessly. Oh, here, do you need more paper towels?
Yes, please.
So you want to be gentle about handling it to excess. Okay, you don't want to kind of manipulate the clay too much because it is not going to like that. It kind of has a memory. So be thoughtful and kind of push the clay into that position and then just leave it. Don't go out and in and out and in because it's not going to respond very well. Once you get to a place where you're like, yeah, I'm reasonably happy with this piece. This little pot is not perfectly centered, but it's not, you know, it's not bad. Then you can take your sponge and kind of sop up any excess water from the inside the piece or from the bat. Okay. And then this piece is way too soft and mushy to handle, which is why we throw on the bat. So at this point, we can lift our piece off of the bat, bag it, put it in the damp cabinet to dry out slowly. And then next time, we can kind of cut it off the bat and kind of start to shape it. You can cut the video now, Megan.
Okay.